All right, so I just listened to an excellent X space here on X called the Aggregated, episode 131, and this is hosted by QuickSwap, Dragonfi 2.0 at QuickSwap DEX, and co-hosted by Aztec Lit VM Seer and Polygon. So I'm only going to cherry pick a couple talking points from Reggie for the Veri community. If you want to watch the whole episode, you can check it out here. The URL is right here, or just go check out QuickSwap at QuickSwap DEX on X, and you can find a link to this. Actually, I'll throw it in the comments below as well. Yeah, great job. Anyways, check out what Reggie's got to say here.
Hey, I'd like to jump in because it's everybody's too happy, it's too much sunshine. And when everybody's too positive, chances are everybody's wrong. So I have perspective to give. Would you rather the good news or the bad news first? So it's not really about good news and bad news, it's about facts, empiricism, and realism. So as for, I believe I'm 100% behind Kurt in terms of utility versus financial speculation. I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised in New York, and a lot of people uh, fall into the mythos that is Wall Street. Wall Street is an industry that makes money by standing in between two parties. And so whenever they can make a commission, a spread, an interest, or a transaction fee, they will. So they took something that had none of that and they put it in there. And to increase their bonus pool through commissions, spreads, transaction fees, etc., they marketed the hell out of it. They started with Bitcoin and they're moving on to the other assets. The problem is that has absolutely nothing to do with the fundamental value of the networks themselves. As a matter of fact, Bitcoin is more speculation than anything else. And when it started, it was more utility than anything else. Now, nothing necessarily wrong with that unless you're still, imbibing on the Kool-Aid that Bitcoin is more valuable as a speculative asset than a utility asset. Now, Bitcoin has lost its utility over time because those who imbibed in Bitcoin have lost their way. But utility is the only way you can have a fundamental value that will persevere through Wall Streetification. Think of utility as a put option. So when you have bad news or someone just successfully shorts Bitcoin, or for whatever reason, the price goes down, the utility value is the floor, right? The value floor. And anytime it goes below that value floor, you have guaranteed money by purchasing it. Think of it as arbitrage. A good example would be a building. You have the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building throws off $100 million a month in rent. Okay, so let's use straight numbers. Okay, no capitalization. That makes Empire State Building worth $1.2 billion. Okay, because you'll price it at 1 year's rent. Now, if you have a big real estate crash in terms of pricing, not leases, and they drive the price of the Wall Street, the Empire State Building down to $100 million. Does that mean you lost money? No, because now you're getting $1.2 billion of cash flow off a $100 million principal. So just for that fact alone, that price would be driven up by anybody who can count. When you Wall Streetify Bitcoin, you're just proving people can't count or they're willing to speculate, whether that's food theory. Now, moving on past the Wall Streetification of Bitcoin, I'm going to get back to that. The good news is there is a very, very strong use case for distributed ledger technologies and their centralized brethren and cousins, and that is AI. In order for LLMs and the new AI frontier models to really be worth their investment, you're going to have to set them free, which means you have to have them become agentic. You have to let them move along and transact on their own, or at least with a quasi-sovereign perspective. That means they have to buy and sell assets, services, utility, etc. Think of your ChatGPT going on as an agent with your parameters and guardrails, buying compute to solve a problem, or buying development services that it can itself take care of, or buying storage, etc., etc., etc. Now, they're not going to go and use a credit card. They're not going to go through the banking system. They're going to use DOT rails. And either they'll come up with their own DLT rails or they use an extant DLT rails simply because they're already used by the world at large, writ large. And you have the most likely the largest use case of DLT rails ever. There are going to be more agents buying and selling things than people buying and selling things, and companies buying and selling things by multiple. Agents can replicate. What is an agent? An agent could be what makes your Tesla work, your Samsung refrigerator work, your cell phone, your watch, your earbuds, etc. Multiply that by an order of what? 100, 200, 1,000 times, and think about that commerce. So the DLT race is just getting started. But that is not what these digital asset treasuries are buying or selling. They're selling the Wall Streetification of this technology, which is close to meaningless. And they're doing it at a very, very high risk. You know, what happens when the patent holders that cover Bitcoin decide to enforce their patents? And none of this is disclosed in any of the S1 filings. Okay, they're not disclosed as a risk. What happens? You're going to have a correction, price correction, a strong one. Now, that price correction guarantees to halt at the utility floor because remember, that's that put option. Okay, but that put option doesn't exist in the minds of investors when they don't even know that a put option exists. They don't even know that the IP that is being used is patented and owned by a private entity. And they've sipped the Kool-Aid saying, but this is open source. And because it's open source, we can do whatever we want. But that's not true. Open source is a licensing paradigm based upon copyright law. Okay, if I stole your car, if I stole your Tesla that has all the agents in it, and it's operating, buying downloads and upgrades to the software and compute and toll booth access, etc., and I open sourced it and gave free Uber rides, does that make that Tesla belong to me now? Of course not. There's so much that everybody's missing that in every other industry would never be overlooked, right? If Intel decided or Qualcomm decided to build a new chip fab, do you think they checked to see if that technology was owned by somebody before they put $13 billion into it? And it doesn't matter if they did or not. Trust me, the investors would. And if they didn't, trust me, you'd have a shareholder lawsuit quick, fast. Not to mention, of course, the obvious patent infringement lawsuit. So I'm going to land my plane there. None of this is good news or bad news. It's fact and perspective. You're on a cell phone, right?
Amen. Yes, sir. Let's go with that.
Okay. So assuming you're using an Apple, if you're using something like a Samsung Fold or something more advanced, you're using between 1,200 and 2,000 patents. Okay. Those patents are purchased and used by Apple and or Samsung because they have to. Number one, they can't invent everything. And if you're going to grow at any significant pace, you're going to have to use others' technology. Number one. Number two, they matter to Apple and Samsung and to everybody who patented and invented that technology. The fastest growing technologies in the world are also the most rife with patents. The slowest technologies in the world have a very thin patent thicket. Okay, it's simply not true to say patents don't matter or they slow innovation. Look at the most innovative and fastest growing technologies. Pharmaceuticals, genetic engineering, cell phones, the internet back in the 90s and 2000s and 2010s. Just look at history. So words are one thing, but historical fact is hard to disprove.
Reggie, I have a question for you. I don't know when you have to leave. You said something about a plane, but I know a little bit about you, and I've been trying to find out more. Funnily enough, in the Litecoin community, there's a lot of people that really respect you and have been pushing me to research and find out more about you. I was recently looking at the silver rounds to support you. And it's interesting that you're here because I was just like doing research and everything on Veritaseum and all this stuff. But anyways, is there a scenario where these patents aren't hold and it causes a massive disruption or a crash in is there a scenario where somehow there's a good outcome, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would need for you to define what a good outcome is. Because a lot of people comment, and I'm not a lawyer, so, don't take my word as legal gospel.
100%. So good outcome to me is the market not crashing. Because I think when you were talking earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, you said something about these patents holders coming in and causing a scare. I mean, is there a way that things can move forward positively in your eyes, where it works on both sides? You're not only people holding patents, but maybe the projects, companies that are maybe potentially infringing, and the market as a whole, with it doesn't turn into a scare crashing things.
Well, let's walk through it. I think his name is CK. I was just asking him if he was on a cell phone. He said he was, in a very colorful fashion, of course. And Apple has about maybe 1,500 patents that they're using to be able to legally sell the cell phone. And there are certain things they didn't do legally, at least according to the holder of the patent. One is the heart rate medical information for the Apple Watch, which the patent holder, which is a very, very small company, won in the ITC, the International Trade Commission, and forced Apple to remove that functionality from the watch. Now, Apple did not have to remove the functionality. The patent holder was asking Apple to pay for their property. Apple chose not to pay for their property, or alleged that they weren't using their property. I'm not going to get into the merits of the case, but notice, if Apple would have paid them what they asked for, and what they asked for was legitimate, you wouldn't even known about it. And you'd have had an Apple Watch, with even more functionality than they had in the past. If you're using a Samsung or a Chinese Android or Apple phone to have this conversation, or if you're using a laptop, the Bluetooth 6 or Wi-Fi or anything else, you're using the cornucopia of patents. Has your machine crashed? Has the price of your cell phone dropped to zero? Of course not. The only time you have a problem is when you use somebody's property without consent, without paying for it, and they ask you to stop. That's when you have a problem. Okay. And as for crashing, most of the crashes are the businesses or the companies that are either using the property without permission, or who spend a lot of money to develop the property and couldn't defend it. Okay. But from the end user perspective, patents are very, very bullish, because it allows something like Bitcoin to go from 2009 alpha beta code to 2025 with the Lightning Network and partially signed Bitcoin transfers, etc. And you have more capable chains such as Ethereum and based on top of Ethereum, and Hashgraph and Hedera, and go on down the list. None of these developers invented all this stuff themselves. And even if they could, it would take them a lifetime to do it. So if you're going to go fast, you have to use technology at hand. And unless you're the smartest group in the entire world, times 45,000, chances are somebody else invented it. So if you want to use it, you license it. You want to go past the toll booth, pay your $1.50. You want to drive through the gate and break it open and outrun the cops and take your chance in court with a judge, be my guest. But $1.50 is a lot easier. So does that answer your question?
That does.
Okay.
That does.
And one other thing, in terms of things crashing. Now, I gave an example of the DEXs, the digital asset treasuries, and the ETFs, etc. They have, they work with financial engineers. I'm a financial engineer. That's my background and training. Financial engineering and corporate valuation. I short things that are overpriced, and I find things that are underpriced. And I make things if I can't find something to short or go long. Okay, I got into technology because I'm a nerd. So I got into Bitcoin in 2013. Okay, so when you purchase an asset as if it is a financial asset, but in reality, it's a technology, you have to assume the technology risk, or you assume it by default, but you have to recognize that you've assumed the technology risk. I look at all these ETFs and all these DATs and all these ABCs and XYZs, and there's very, very little disclosure or disclaimers about the technology risk. The technology risk is by far the strongest risk, because it's a technology. Everything else is secondary and tertiary. So that's where I could see a significant drop. But that's a business operation drop. Okay, that's not truly a financial risk. That's a business management risk because freedom of operate analysis were never conducted. And in any other industry, the first thing that they ask when you're selling somebody something and someone comes to buy it, they say, well, is it yours to sell? Okay, I'm done now.
Yeah, well, Reggie, one more question, and thank you for taking the time here. There are so many people in this industry. They're just building. They got their heads down. They're taking technologies. I think at the end of the day, a lot of people, especially like devs, because I've been in the builder space for a very long time. I don't think they mean to infringe if they are. I just think these are passionate kids that are building, and they're trying to build the next innovative technology. And they're experimenting things, even from my side with building and incubating projects at Lunar Digital Assets, which is our full stack blockchain venture studio. We have used open source software now. I'm wondering, where do people go to figure out, besides like obviously receiving something in the mail that says, hey, you're infringing on XYZ, where can people go in the blockchain space? And I know in the traditional world, there's like websites and things, to figure out, what's patented and what's not. And with the growing number of blockchain technologies being patented all around the world in different jurisdictions, I mean, how does someone navigate this so that they can at least take this into consideration?
It's called a freedom to operate analysis, FTO. You hire a lawyer that specializes in intellectual property and other things surrounding that space, and you ask them the same question you asked me. I'm starting a business. We're gaining traction. I want to know if it's legal for me to actually build here, and if not, what can I do about it? You can build around. If you find out it's patented, you have three options. Okay, you can build around the technology. You can pay the people to use their technology if they're willing to sell it to you, right? And most are, unless they're a direct competitor. Or you can steal it. Okay, now if you steal it, there are consequences to pay. There's punitive damages for willful infringement, because if it's shown that, hey, you knew this was mine, you knew that was my car, and you got in the driver's seat and drove off anyway. Or you have the car until and if you get caught. And if you get caught, it'd be highly unrealistic for you to assume there'd be no consequences because you willfully stole it. If you did it by mistake, unless the patent holder is an absolute jerk, you're like, okay, no problem. License technology, go about your business. And then the third option is to engineer around it. So if you need a car and you have to steal somebody's car, you can invent a different mode of transportation. With most patents that are super duper narrow and specific, that's doable as long as you have the budget. But there are patents called foundational patents that happen to cover multiple industries because they cover a way of accomplishing things and not a specific, finite method. A good example would be Google's PageRank, or the guy that created Amazon. Can't think of his name, but Amazon's one-click purchase.
Bezos.
Yeah, Bezos.
Bezos.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a cornucopia of foundational patents. The gene splicing patent, which everybody's fighting over right now because, that is the future for real. You can create disease or cancer-proof genes, et cetera, et cetera. So a foundational patent is basically a patent that is either too expensive or unrealistic or impossible to engineer around. But anybody who has a foundational patent will likely be forced to license it because the government will say this is national good. So you don't have to give it away for free, but you do have to license it. You cannot tell the rest of the world you can't use it.
Hey, I've got a quick
Right.
question for you. Sorry, Aztec. It was just
Yeah.
about like if you think that there's any harmful or overuse of patents, specifically like patent squatters, right? People who get the patents for things but then never do anything to actually develop that product and instead just sit on the patent for it, waiting for somebody else to use it. Do you think that there's any like way around that? Do you think that that's harmful?
Well, that's a difficult question because you get into good or bad. So let's suppose you have a 17-year-old kid who comes up with a new way of, hey, he's able to cure cancer. Okay. And he gets a patent. He becomes he's on his 18th birthday, but he sits on it. And so everybody say, but you're wasting this. You should go to hell, blah, 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 blah. And the reality is he's 18 years old and he doesn't have the $7 million to enforce his patent. As a matter of fact, he has $70 until he gets a job at Walmart. So is he a bad person?
No, of course not.
So
No.
that's one perspective. There's another perspective where you have a guy who's just an asshole and, he purchases patents from that 17-year-old and he just hunts people with them. So that's legal and it's a business model, but I can't necessarily say that adds to the value of the world on a global basis. Okay.
Do you think that there's any way around it to like continue to enforce patents, but to do something so that people like the asshole can't, can't patent squat in the way that they have?
Well, you can do the invention yourself, or you can make
Okay.
sure that the people who do the invention have the liquidity to hold on to their invention. See, in the news, you have a lot of mantra about patent trolls, etc., but they're by far the minority of the population. Right? The majority of the population are patent pirates. Those are big companies that use small companies or individual inventors' inventions without their will. And they benefit and make billions or hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars from it. And they do that because they know that the 17-year-old simply doesn't have the capital to compete. Okay, and that's what happens the vast majority of the time. But 17-year-olds don't own magazines. They don't own CoinDesk or New York Times or Wall Street Journal, and they don't have access to it, so nobody ever hears their story.
Yeah.
Reggie, my concern is that going down this patent rabbit hole is that
Go ahead.
I joined the blockchain space because of the innovation and the punk rock kind of vibe of disrupting the status quo. And my only concern with patents, which I fully understand, that they're property and they should be respected, but on the other side, I feel that if it comes to a point where you're a developer and you've built something and it's really great and you didn't know you were infringing, when you build that stack out so far, it's kind of hard to build around it later on. Because you've built so far and on top of, let's say a particular technology. And I am worried that this whole patent thing turns into a problem that actually ends up hurting innovators. And so I just hope that this all goes well, in the
I'm just going to add here real quick. It really depends on how much the developer actually makes on the project, right? Because I assume licensing fees is a percentage of profit. So this idea of developers getting snuffed out by patents is in my opinion not really based in reality. It'll just be a percentage fee on profits, as far as I'm aware. Anyways, I'm gonna get back to this.
the future when and if people try to start respecting these patents or realize that they're a bigger thing and the precedent that it all sets, for the future of innovation, blockchain technologies, no one owning the network kind of thing, but everyone owning it together.
I believe Coinbase has between 39 and 100 patents, and they're trying very hard. Okay, and if you look at the books, Coinbase came after me. Okay, to invalidate my patents. Didn't go well for them, but they did. Gemini, I believe, is a member of COPA. Gemini has 9 stablecoin patents. 9. Okay, and if you map Gemini stablecoin patents against the Genius Act, you'd be like, But see, nobody ever reads this because people don't believe in the technology, the law, and the finance together. You have to look at global macroeconomics. You have to look at intellectual property law, right? You have to look at regulatory law and securities and commodities law. You have to look at software engineering. And you have to look at finance, right? Those 4 or 5 expertise, whatever the plural of that is, okay? Expertise, right? Right? Getting all 4 of those together in one room, not to mention one person, is extremely expensive and very difficult to do. But when you do it, you look at the world in a very different place. Okay? There's a lot I can share. I just don't want to share it because it causes more problems than, I need right now. But if you are anti-patent, you shouldn't even be on this call because you're using a couple of thousand of them. You also probably would never want to use Bitcoin. Bitcoin has several patents and inventions incorporated into it, multiple. And people say, well, who would you go after? You go after the people who make money from using your invention. So that wouldn't be, the 19-year-old high school kid in the basement. That would be someone who makes, 8, 9, 10, 20, $30 billion a year, cycling your invention, paying you.
Got it.
Mic drop.
Got it.
And I think that's a good place to end it. Again, this is an X space called the Aggregated, episode 131. These guys host it every Friday. Great job again at QuickSwap DEX and Aztec Lit VM Seer at circle_crypto, and of course Polygon. So yeah, really great discussion. This one here lasted over 2 hours, 2 hours and 23 minutes. So if you want to catch the full episode, the URL is here, which I'll link below in the comments. Yeah, really great discussion. Looking forward to the next one. Yeah, so I'll see you guys next time.